Hi, and thank you for tuning into this podcast. My name is Shay Douglas, and in this series, we explore community connection, optimal human potential, and transformational collective growth through inspiring conversations with a diverse range of people who are working towards a positive change in the world. I hope you enjoy this episode today, and if you would please take the time to like, share, and subscribe, we would greatly appreciate that. And I hope you enjoy. Welcome back, guys. Shay Douglas here. I'm with Dennis.
How are you doing?
O'Connor from Awakening Health. I'm very good. We're back for another episode of every Thursday. We've been getting together. This is the third episode that we've done where we talk about health and well-being, particularly in context with what is going on in the world right now. And we're faced with some really fascinating times, from viruses and diseases to health and optimizing human biohacking, and looking at ways that we can really optimize our own personal human health so that when we go out into the world, we're contributing in a positive way to the collective health of humanity. Now, last week we spoke about vitamin D, and Dennis dropped some really nice truth bombs on how vital vitamin D is for our health. And this week, we're going to be talking about the psychosomatic effects of what we're faced with in the world right now. And so Dennis has got some great insights. Again, he's worked in the health profession for over 20 plus years. He's a phenomenal researcher and avid truth teller, as well as just a wonderful human being. So Dennis, this is great, exciting to do this. We're really starting to get some traction with this content and these connections. We've got an exciting webinar. We'll drop the seed here. We'll explain a little bit more later on what that webinar is all about next week on Thursday and how you can be involved. And it's for free, as well as we've got a special guest for next week's episode. Is that right?
We got a couple lined up. We won't. They're not too sure if they can make this specific time, so we'll just put a little question mark on that, but we could have somebody really exciting at this time slot. If not, we're going to choose another random topic about health, but we will be back at this time.
Super exciting. So I want to just thank you guys for watching this. If you do like this video, please like it, share it, leave us a comment. Any questions that you have, we'd be happy to answer. But let's jump into it. Knees deep. Psychosomatics. Tell us, Dennis, what is psychosomatics, man?
So one of the things that I'd like to just say beforehand is that in the medical arena, we just have all these massive words, okay? And one of the things that I really want to bring to the party, to any kind of party, is just simplifying this stuff. And all these words like psychosomatic and you name it, just end up, they can confuse the hell out of people. So even this word psychosomatic, it can be broken down really simply. And I guess the simplest explanation of this would be symptoms which you manifest. Mm-hmm. Okay, that's all it is.
Symptoms you manifest.
And that's a little bit different to symptoms that you actually directly get. So for example, if you fall off your bicycle or your motorbike and you break an arm, that's a symptom. That's an obvious symptom. You get hurt, you have pain related to that. But sometimes in our bodies, we actually get symptoms, especially of pain, which seem to have no cause. Mm-hmm. And the expression for this is called psychosomatic, which kind of means, and there's a little bit of almost a derogatory kind of term behind this, which means it's all in your head. But just because it's all in your head, it does not mean to say that the impact of those symptoms can't be as real as if you actually did fall off your arm and fall off your bike and break your arm. Mm-hmm. So people who do have psychosomatic conditions, they're in pain, they're hurting. You get a tiny little cohort of those people who in actual fact may present to doctors or emergency departments because they might be drug seeking, for example, or attention seeking. But in general, the vast majority of these guys, they're hurting. There's something wrong with them.
And does it have to do mostly with the mentally or physically, emotionally?
Well, that's the $1 million question. And the more I look into this, and the more, I mean, you've obviously had chats with Dr. Bruce Lipton. I think that there is something external going on, but to try and capture and quantify that is really quite difficult. The experience that person is having, that's real. That's real. And you can get things like inflammation and these symptoms, lots of different types of symptoms, but we can take the conversation in that direction kind of now about where that comes from, what that looks like.
Yeah, interesting. So I guess just to kind of relay what you're sharing there, that in the short term, keep it simple for myself and for the others out there, psychosomatics is essentially a disease, or can it be harmonious as well? Can it be something that you manifest that uplifts your and raises your vibration, or is it always something that is a negative effect?
I would be saying that the somatic part is indicative of symptoms. And to my mind, you possibly could argue that you could get positive symptoms from happiness, but it doesn't usually fit into that little paradigm that we're talking about. So usually, to me, that would indicate something negative. And disease is a great word. We have these kind of perceptions of what we call disease, something nasty, cancers, tumors, etc. But if we break that word down, as you know, it can be put into two parts: dis, meaning something negative, and ease, a lack of ease. So if you have somebody with psychosomatic symptoms of pain, that sure as hell is a lack of ease that they're experiencing at any given time.
Yeah, interesting. And do you think we've seen, like, over the last year, a lot of psychosomatic effects with everything that's going on in the world?
Here we go.
What is your take on how, like, are we collectively manifesting something on a grand scale because we've been told that there's this crazy thing to be scared and afraid of, or is it I don't know. Wow,
and so many tangents that you can just bounce off that question. It sounds like just such a simple question and an easy question. It's not. It's a really, really deep question. So, and again, we can branch off into the kind of more, I guess, etherical kind of stuff, or we can stick to body type stuff. And this kind of fits very much into what I feel is my forte, which is talking certainly about depression and anxiety. And our bodies are kind of built to more or less, this is just one way of explaining it, have two gears, okay? And one of the gears is rest and digest and repairing. And the other gear is survival, okay? So that people postulate that comes from us being cavemen and running from tigers and all these kind of things.
So just to break it down, is that simply based upon the state of our nervous system as well? The gears you're talking to?
Absolutely. So we have, again, not to get too technical, two parts of our nervous system. We have this sympathetic nervous system and a parasympathetic nervous system. And the traditional medical thinking is that the sympathetic nervous system is something that kind of gets activated and stimulated very easily, and then the parasympathetic system is something that is not in our control, and it balances the sympathetic nervous system. Now, I totally contradict this belief that the parasympathetic nervous system is outside of our control. It actually is within our control, and you need to learn different things in order to bring that under control. And these things were not traditionally thought about. And these things involve things like active breathing and movement and yoga and all the things that Earth Heroes do, that the channel does brilliantly well. So we can actually have a certain amount of control over this system that supposedly we can't control.
Yeah, nice. It's really interesting. It's something that we look into a lot with the breathwork element and how we can alter our states or gears, as you had mentioned, to shift from one or the other, even to amplify our energy. Would you say that there's like a percentage of time on average that we should be spending in the parasympathetic versus the sympathetic? Like if we were operating 100% in one area, it's probably going to create a disease, right? Should it be 50-50 in each, or what would you suggest?
I think with all the stimulus that we've got at the moment, that it's nearly impossible unless you're in an environment that facilitates you getting to that 50-50, for example. And the only environments I could ever envisage that being possible would be if you were in a monastery or in a monk on a mountaintop or something like that. And for average normal people, or the masses, I guess, for want of a better word, the people are in a job for 8 hours. Then invariably they're going home for 8 hours. And when you take away, they might be looking after children, they might be working overtime, they might have some different projects. So to try and schedule, I mean, I would be thinking that some people would be lucky if they got 10 minutes in a day where they're trying to control their parasympathetic nervous system. So the way I always look at it is it's a gradient. And if you're somewhere along that gradient, you can always push a little bit further up the gradient. If you don't know about some of this stuff, you start someplace and then you kind of increase the time you put into it. And I think for spending at least an hour a day, having this focus on being still and trying to get that stuff under control, it has to be the absolute minimum you should be considering.
Yeah, interesting. So just bringing it back to the psychosomatic effects of what we're moving through, and how does that relate to understanding our nervous system, shifting from the fight or flight response to the rest and relaxation? Are we like as a collective and an individual finding ourselves primarily in the, you know, the fight or flight fear-based kind of default based upon what we're experiencing on a large scale, or are we, you know, happy, blissful, in harmony in the rest and relaxation state?
Okay, great thing. It's a great question. Again, it's something that I'm very, very passionate about. And so we're going to do a tiny little bit of physiology, okay? So essentially, when the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system are kind of like two gears. So it's like in a car. So one is the brake and the other is the accelerator. And we know in a car, you can't really run both at the same time. You gotta either have one going or the other going. So it's kind of impossible to be in both of those states at once. So we have to make an attempt to kind of switch it off.
Yeah.
And there's a little bit of a balance between the very short acting chemical, which helps us to survive when we have a crisis happening, and that chemical is called adrenaline. And there's a longer term chemical, which is also a stress hormone. It's called cortisol. Okay, and unfortunately, it's this. People have this misconception that cortisol is bad. Cortisol is not bad. Okay, what's driving the cortisol response needs to be switched off. Your body is always trying to help you out, and because we have high cortisol in relation to stress, this doesn't mean to say that the cortisol is the evil thing. Okay, it's the thing that's driving it. And what I can see, especially on my social media and the people who I engage with and the kind of messages, I mean, I don't watch television, but I do look at the headlines, and I can't help but to think that this constant bombarding of fear is having globally an absolutely incredibly destructive effect on not only our psychologies, but also on our bodies directly by having us in this continuous fear state. And the other thing that I kind of feel very strongly about, as you know from the chats that we've had, is it is absolutely impossible, I feel, that the powers that be, the so-called experts on our televisions, don't realize these simple basics about how our bodies work. And then you can take that a little bit further and you can wonder, why the hell are these people who are meant to be keeping us healthy and telling us stuff that relates to healthy information, why are they behind this bandwagon almost of pounding us with this fear that there is a person coming towards you that is just this evil mass of squirming virus that can turn around at any second and infect you, and then you're going to kill all your family and your grandmother? And quite simply, the statistics do not bear this out. They don't bear this out.
Yeah, it's super interesting and brings up a lot of questions as well, and also a really big question that comes up for me in that whole response to being aware of what we're bombarded with in, you know, the news and in our communities and in the paper and on TV, and even, you know, if you're flying anywhere domestically on the airlines, and it's just everywhere at the moment. What is the biggest fear?
So elaborate. Are you talking about the one
like,
that's being put upon us, or the one that is manifesting?
Well, I mean, for people to be afraid of the virus, they're ultimately fearing that they're going to die.
Absolutely, yes.
It's the fear of death.
Yes.
Which opens up a whole can of worms when we look to discuss what that deeper element of our relationship to death is. And this is kind of a little bit of a segue away from psychosomatic.
Yeah,
but
I think it's
also relevant. Yeah. So I guess I'm just curious, like, I mean, the common narrative around death in our culture is one of, it's, you know, we're told it's an endpoint, or it's a very negative, grieving, sad, lonely process, or, you know, it's the end of this life as we know. But fundamentally, I have no idea what happens when we die. And I'm sure, I don't think you've been there yet, but it's inevitable for all of us. At the end of the day, we're all going to die at some point. It's the natural cycles of life. And it seems that, I guess I'm just curious in exploring this element, because it's like the psychosomatic effects. Are we creating and manifesting these diseases or viruses more to accelerate that process and move us towards death quicker, or how is it like happening on a deeper psychological level?
So much to cover there, and I'll see if I can kind of shape things into some semblance. But so one of the observations I make about that comment, which is so, I think, relevant, is this concept of fear. And fear, as I often explain, and we don't have really time to go into this in more detail. Some of my programs do address this, okay? But there is no fear in the present. Fear is always in the future, okay? Right. So, and if you think about it, somebody would say, well, no, that's not quite right. But if you saw a tiger in the corner of the room, that fear is still in the present because he hasn't eaten you yet. It might be 1 millisecond later. Yeah. It might be 5 seconds later. It's still, in the future.
It's in the future.
In the future. So that thing has not happened yet. So unless you are actually in the middle of death, there is no fear in the absolute present moment. And this is where our breathing techniques come into, and our mindfulness techniques come into, and things, getting lost in the moment, doing something that you're absolutely passionate about, painting, being with somebody you love. There is no fear there. This is the perfect way to switch off this response. The next thing that happens is when we have this cortisol response. Cortisol is basically an anti-inflammatory, okay? And we have inflammatory chemicals in our bodies that are associated with us trying to heal, okay? And we can measure these things. It's a thing called C-reactive protein, CRP, and it's up when we are unwell, okay? So we have a very physical thing going on which prevents us from healing, okay? And then when we have this bombardment of fear that's happening from our television channels and our screens and our phones, and again, all these little pings and these notifications, all these things keep us in a state of arousal. And when we're in a state of arousal, absolutely, when we're looking around for the next, bag of viruses that are coming towards us with a mask on, we can't heal, okay? And then you could also very, very easily extrapolate and suggest, and I talked about this in one of my last YouTube videos, that 3 years ago, if I've had, this kind of joke that goes around about having man flu, okay? And sometimes when I've had a bad flu, I've felt, hey, I'm dying. And to my partner at the time, or whatever, she might say, hey, listen, get to health, get up out of bed, you're not dying. And I might crawl out of bed. Now, if I didn't have the awareness I do have about the things related to the medical industry, if I was in bed 2 years ago and I've got one of those really bad flus and I'm looking at the television, and I'm looking at my phone and I'm hearing about this pandemic, do you think that's going to make me worse or better? I could very easily be calling an ambulance, taking myself to hospital, and then depending on the treatment I get, I might not survive. And that is dangerous. And then there's a few other very interesting kind of, external things that we know about. We know that there is a kind of a consciousness thing that happens outside of us, okay? There's a guy called, who I often reference, a fellow called Rupert Sheldrake. And he has this concept of I think it's morphic resonance he talks about. And a great example of that is Roger Bannister. He broke the 4-minute mile back, in the last century early. And after that, all the records started tumbling. There's other weird stuff that goes on. You have these rats that run mazes, and they're given these really difficult mazes to run that they can't break. And then they're given certain drugs to see if they can be more intelligent or not. And every so often, one of those rats in one country works out how to do the maze. And everybody's going, oh, wow. But the funny thing that happens is different countries, the same barrier drops. Barriers in different countries with those rats fall down also, and there's been no connection. There's been no connection. So one person will see a scientific study and go, hey, those rats did this. And they go, the rats in my country did as well. And then another guy. So we know that something weird drops out into the ether. So if we have this constant conscious reminder of illness and, almost a disgust for your fellow man that they're dirty and clean and are going to kill you. That to me it's bordering on, if not criminal. It's a crime against consciousness.
Oof, that's a big claim, man. And yeah, wow, that's huge. Something that I just want to peel it back to around what you were explaining with the fear element. Yeah. And I really liked how you said fear is always a projection of what's coming in the future. And for me, that's like fundamentally the fear of the unknown, and then the fear of uncertainty. Like where it seems that just human nature, just from my own experience, is that it's nice to have like a routine and certainty and things in place, and I know what's coming and I know how it to be. But the moment that it's like it's changing, it's scary, because it's like, what's it changing to? What's going to come out of this? How are we going to move through this? Everything that I knew or thought I knew is maybe not relevant anymore, and I'm going to have to learn something new that I don't know, and I'm going to have to learn again and start from scratch, and maybe be humble. If I've been, over a long time building up this identity of someone or something or some business, or the fear is all going to be stripped away. It's like, wow, it's real, man. It's really real. And I really like what you shared around it being a future projection, even when it's present with us right now, like in that moment.
Yeah.
And essentially the psychosomatic element of it is that we're manifesting the pain and the suffering in that moment when it's not even potentially.
Absolutely. There's a few interesting comments I'll make in what you said there. And if you think about it, and there might be some tiny little exceptions here, okay? But your body does not really know the difference between fear and excitement. That's the first thing. Yeah. Okay, so when we're looking at change, we have the same physiological response. Our heart rates go up, etc., etc. But it's a similar. Excuse me, I don't know what this is.
He's popular. Hey, everyone's onto him, eh, guys?
This is a video that just started playing for some reason. I don't know why. So there is no. Our bodies don't know how to work that out. Yeah. So as part of addressing, especially things like anxiety, if you were able to make that mental switch to that anxiety actually being excitement, it can be a really effective way at addressing some of your anxiety symptoms. Mm-hmm. So this is the first thing. The second thing is when you get totally immersed in a mental situation, again, sometimes your body cannot tell the difference. And a really good example of that is getting immersed in a really in-depth movie, for example, a horror movie or an action movie, and your body reacts like it's in that movie. Okay, so when we are living in an environment,
it's kind of like you're watching a horror film and then like something scary happens, you jump up when you get the shock.
Yeah,
because it's like creating that effect in you.
And to my mind, there's a couple of different worlds going on right now. I've got the world where I am calling bullshit on a lot of the stuff we're getting told in relation to the health information we're getting from TV. And I see a world of I mean, we live in paradise. I don't know, for people who are listening, we live in this little place at the top of Australia. We have rainforests and reefs, and we have these beautiful birds flying in the sky. It's just incredible. This is the world I live in. And I know for a lot of coconuts dropping off trees, to be honest, you got a higher chance of, if you're young and healthy, of being killed by a coconut than you have of COVID. Okay, this is just a fact. But again, there's other people, even in this place that we're living, who are living in the zombie apocalypse, that are looking at these, what they see as dirty bags of viruses and germs approaching them, and they're walking across the street. So just from the most basic logic, that cannot be healthy, living in that kind of fear.
Yeah, and insulating yourself.
We talked about vitamin D. Staying indoors. Keep the most important substance that you need to create in your body. One of them is vitamin D. You can't get that stuck inside. Yeah, I'm going to rant in a second. I got to breathe.
Yeah, no, take a deep breath, man. Even the element of human touch, connection.
Absolutely.
There's so much like wonderful science that's coming out now, and that's proving how vital that is for us to be connected just through touch or in proximity. And here we are, we're supposed to be stand back.
And more than that, I saw a video on my social media yesterday of these people wrapped in bin liners, garbage liners. Okay, and essentially you have a layers of insulation. And again, just people realize some of these things, but sometimes the dots don't connect. But when we go to hospital, if we have chest pain, we get what's called an EEG an EKG or an ECG, which is an electrocardiogram put on us. This measures electric frequencies from our heart. And those electrical frequencies actually radiate and beam out from around us. Okay, our brains work on electricity. When you think our nerves, this is just very small amounts of electricity. So there is lots of great scientific evidence to show that these minglings of different energies that our bodies are producing all the time are really important for health. There's lots of pheromone exchanges that we happen. There's a lot that happen between people when they meet. Okay, this is why we're I guess designed to be tribal. We have our communities, whether that's for some people is a bowling community or a singing community or a fraternity. It doesn't really matter. We're really things like Zoom and things like electronic tribes just do not cut it. And this is also going to make people much, much sicker.
Super interesting. And so given the circumstances of the environment that we find ourselves in, what are some very simple steps that people can take when they find themselves, in that hyperextended, it's not excitement now, it's fear, even if they're not fully aware of it, but it's like this stress response. They're a little bit panicky, freaking out. What are some simple steps they can
Excellent,
take?
great question. If you're healthy, and again, everybody, this is not medical advice, okay? This is me and Shay having a talk. So if you've got any medical conditions, run it past your doctor. So and the conversation here is educational, okay, as opposed to medical advice. So if you are fit and healthy, and you have this barrage, I guess, of chemicals that are happening in your body is telling you, please run from a tiger. Please help me out here. So one of the most powerful things you can do is listen to your body and maybe go for a run. Go for a run. Okay. Or drop and do 20 press-ups or 30 press-ups or do your sit-ups. And as soon as your body meets that need of having to do something, you could be absolutely astonished about how you feel afterwards. It is incredibly difficult to be fearful if your arms and legs are burning because you've knocked out a lot of press-ups or a lot of sit-ups. This is the very first thing. The second, once you get rid of those chemicals that have been caused, move the body, absolutely. Once you get rid of those chemicals, and interesting, we talk about breathing, but if you are out of breath from doing something like that, you're shifting dead air and bad air. So in a sense, you're actually kind of active breathing. Okay, so once you get out of that crisis situation, then you can focus on the more moderate stuff. And that more moderate stuff is all about finding stillness and, to use a bit of a cliched expression, being in the moment. And people get a little bit confused about that. It can be anything. So some people can do calligraphy or can do art or can do singing, and they just lose that portion of time. This is a healing time when this happens. Some people find it through practicing meditation, swimming. It can be anything.
But what about doing a podcast, talking all the time?
Man, I was just right here now with you. I was so here. It's not funny. So all this movement is good. I'm just moving my lymphatic system. I'm doing lymphatic drain. This is all fantastic. Absolutely. I'm talking. I'm changing my introthoracic pressure.
We're gonna have to do this again. We're gonna have to do it every week.
This is necessary for my health. But again, laughing. What a powerful thing to do. Laughing is incredibly powerful. So we just have to get away from this bombardment of fear, because it's either directly going to make us sick, or from a psychosomatic point of view, we are going to manifest illness. It is really that simple.
So essentially, you were saying that it's difficult to differentiate between fear and excitement, where fear could be beneficial, it could be positive. It could help us to move our bodies, it could help us to breathe deeper, it could help us to get that valuable exercise, because it's like, get afraid of something and it's like, okay, got to flick the switch and go for a run or do something and move the body or whatever it may be. And so I guess I'm just curious to explore, like, how do we differentiate that excitement? How do we really know? Is it only a mental thing within our own minds, or we say, oh, this is very exciting, I'm not afraid of it, or is it like when fear is arising for us that we go, oh, let's try and use this as an opportunity to use it in a positive way?
Wow, you're pulling out some good questions, my friend, today. That's an awesome question. Okay, and this relates back to another science that we're getting much more information on. It's this science called neuroplasticity. Okay, and essentially there's lots of different types of neuroplasticity, but they relate to evolving new mechanisms and new pathways, whether they're chemical or actually structural in our brains, okay? And they're related to our nerves. So essentially, we kind of have to wire up different behavior. And it's not as easy as me saying to you, Shay, hey, well, just sort it out, man. It's fear, but it could just easily be excitement. Okay, it's not that easy. We have to work at this kind of stuff. But what we can do, which is a really handy hint, is we can become more aware of our bodies. And when we sometimes have that fear response starting, what happens is we know where that fear response goes, and it amplifies the fear. So it works a little bit like this. Oh shit, here I go again. Oh my God, I'm going to be. And that thought of this horrible situation that you're going to actually get into because you've been there before and you can't breathe, and it actually amplifies everything. Okay, so if you're aware, if you start becoming aware of your body, you can use that very first response as a trigger. And if you can use that first response as a trigger to preempt what could happen, and then go and do your run or do your exercise or go for cycling or whatever it is that floats your boat, then what happens is you slowly but surely change that wiring. And when you get those first little tickles of that anxiety that might happen, or eventually, if you are consistent, that changes into your trigger to do something positive.
Thank you so much for tuning into this episode and for listening to this podcast. I really hope you enjoyed this series, and if you'd like to listen to the full episode and get more conscious content online, tune into our online video platform at earthheroestv.com. Hope you have a great day, guys, and a huge love from me, and see you next time.